I think I'm in love with you," Ethan Blake confessed, his voice breaking as blood soaked through his crisp white shirt, the same shirt he'd worn to her ex's wedding just hours ago. Sophia's trembling hands pressed against the wound as the ambulance sirens wailed in the distance. How had a fake date ended with the billionaire CEO of Eclipse Technologies taking a bullet meant for her? The truth about why someone wanted her dead was still out there, just like the armed man who had fled into the night after shooting the most eligible bachelor in New York. "Stay with me," Sophia pleaded, tears streaming down her porcelain face, her long auburn hair falling around them like a curtain. "You can't die when I haven't even had the chance to tell you that I've been investigating your company for corporate fraud." The revelation hung in the air between them, more shocking than the blood pooling beneath his powerful frame. Her journalism career and his corporate empire stood on opposite sides of a war neither had known they were fighting until tonight. Ethan's piercing blue eyes widened in disbelief before a bitter laugh escaped his lips. "So that's why you really invited me to the wedding? Not because you needed to make your ex jealous, but because you needed access to me." His words were razor sharp despite his weakening state. The stakes couldn't be higher, his life literally bleeding out while the career Sophia had built from nothing teetered on the edge of ruin. But the mystery that truly tormented her now was simpler and infinitely more complicated. Why would a man sacrifice himself for someone who had been lying to him all along? If you're hooked on this emotional roller coaster already, make sure you hit that like button. The truth behind Sophia's investigation will shock you. 3 weeks earlier, Sophia Martin had been staring at the gold, embossed wedding invitation like it was a death sentence. "James and Victoria cordially invite you." Her ex was marrying the woman he'd cheated on her with, and she'd been invited to witness it. Her small apartment felt suffocating as she paced, her silk robe flowing around her perfect figure that James had once claimed wasn't enough to keep him faithful. "You need the nuclear option," her best friend Zoe had declared over wine that night. "Show up with someone so impressive that James chokes on his wedding cake." That's when Zoe had slid her phone across the table, displaying an article about New York's most eligible bachelor Ethan Blake, 32, self-made billionaire and notorious commitment phobe. "And how exactly am I supposed to get a CEO to be my pity date?" Sophia had asked, even as her mind calculated how this could give her the access she needed for her expose on Eclipse Technologies' suspected environmental violations. For 6 months, she'd been gathering evidence for an investigative piece that could make her career, or destroy it, if she couldn't prove her allegations. "You're a resourceful journalist with a perfect opportunity," Zoe had reminded her. "His charity gala is tomorrow night. I can get you in as waitstaff," which is how Sophia found herself spilling champagne on Ethan Blake's bespoke suit at the most exclusive event of the season. "I'm so sorry," she'd gasp, mortified as the golden liquid seeped into what was undoubtedly a $5,000 jacket. Instead of anger, amusement had flickered across his handsome face. "I've had women throw drinks at me before, but usually they aim for my face, not my chest," he'd quipped, his voice a perfect blend of gravel and silk. "I wasn't aiming at all," Sophia had replied, finding her footing. "Though I'm sure plenty of women have had reason too." His unexpected laugh had drawn every eye in the room. Brutal honesty. Refreshing. He'd studied her then, taking in her borrowed uniform and the intelligence behind her emerald eyes. "You don't work here regularly, do you?" The first major turning point came when, instead of having her removed from the gala, Ethan had invited Sophia to his private table. "Tell me why you're really here," he'd challenged, leaning forward with those piercing eyes that seemed to strip away pretenses. "And don't insult either of us with another lie." Sophia had made a split-second decision that would change everything. "I need a date to my ex's wedding, someone who will make him regret ever letting me go." It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't entirely a lie either. What happened next sent ripples through Sophia's carefully constructed plans. "When's the wedding?" Ethan had asked, swirling his whiskey. 3 weeks from Saturday. "I'll do it," he'd said simply, as if agreeing to pick up dry cleaning rather than attend a stranger's wedding. Why would you possibly agree to that? Sophia had asked, genuinely baffled. His smile hadn't reached his eyes. Perhaps I have my own ghosts to exorcise. The mystery of what drove this seemingly untouchable man had planted itself in Sophia's mind, threatening to complicate her already complicated mission. Want to know what secrets Ethan is hiding? Subscribe now to make sure you don't miss what comes next! Over the next 3 weeks, what had begun as a transactional arrangement evolved into something neither had anticipated. Ethan insisted they needed to build a convincing backstory for the wedding, which meant coffee dates, dinners at exclusive restaurants, and a weekend sailing on his yacht to establish comfort. Each meeting was ostensibly for their cover story, but each also gave Sophia opportunities to probe for information about Eclipse's operations. Their 5th practice date took them to the Metropolitan Museum of Art after hours, a privilege Sophia hadn't known existed for anyone. My mother was a curator here, Ethan explained as they wandered through the empty Greek and Roman galleries, their footsteps echoing on the marble. Before she died, she taught me that understanding beauty is as important as creating wealth. And what would she think of what you've built? Sophia asked, watching how the dim security lights caught the angles of his face, softening them in ways the harsh office lighting never could. His pause was weighted with unexpected vulnerability. She'd be proud of the innovation, disappointed by the cost. Something in his voice made Sophia realize she was glimpsing the man behind the corporate armor, someone with regrets and doubts, not the unflappable titan she'd researched. What cost? She'd pressed, both the journalist and the woman wanting to understand. The personal one. His eyes met hers across a glass case containing ancient love tokens. Success demands sacrifice. I've built an empire that employs thousands, but I come home to an empty penthouse every night. The raw admission had caught Sophia off guard, making it harder to maintain the emotional distance her investigation required. By the end of that evening, when his hand brushed hers as they paused before a sculpture of entwined lovers, she'd found herself fighting the urge to lace her fingers through his. You know, most women I meet either want my money or connections, Ethan remarked during their third dinner, the city lights glittering below his penthouse terrace. You're the first to seem completely unimpressed by both. Maybe I'm not most women, Sophia had countered, the wind playing with her long hair as she strategically steered the conversation toward his company's recent acquisition of land in protected wetlands. That much was obvious from the moment you ruined my jacket and didn't try to seduce your way out of it, he'd said with that infuriating smirk that simultaneously annoyed her and made her heart race. But what I can't figure out is what you do want from me. The tension between them grew with each encounter, both the investigative journalist seeking truth and the woman increasingly drawn to the complex man beneath the CEO facade. When his hand brushed hers reaching for the wine, the electricity between them couldn't be attributed to mere acting practice. The night before the wedding brought the first earth-shattering cliffhanger. Ethan had insisted on a final rehearsal dinner at his Hamptons estate, where Sophia found herself wandering into his home office while he took a call. The folder on his desk labeled Martin Investigation caught her eye instantly. Her hands shook as she opened it to find comprehensive research on her. News articles she'd written, her apartment lease, even medical records. But most damning was the surveillance photo of her meeting with her editor, with a handwritten note. Confirm target and motive. Find what you were looking for. Ethan's cold voice from the doorway froze her in place. The warmth that had been building between them vanished in an instant. You've been investigating me, Sophia whispered, backing away as though from a predator. Just as thoroughly as you've been investigating me. His expression was unreadable as he approached. The question is, who's going to reveal their true motives first? If you're on the edge of your seat, hit that like button and leave a comment with your theory about what happens next. The wedding day arrived with both Sophia and Ethan holding their cards close. The tension between them had transformed into something dangerous and electric as they entered the lavish vineyard venue, where James would marry Victoria. Sophia was stunning in a form-fitting emerald gown that matched her eyes, while Ethan commanded attention in a custom tuxedo that emphasized his athletic build. "Remember, we're madly in love," Ethan murmured in her ear as they approached the gathering, his hand possessively at the small of her back. "Try not to think about whether I'm recording our conversations for evidence, and you try not to think about what might happen if I publish what I already know," she replied through a dazzling smile as James spotted them. The charade they performed was flawless, intimate touches, inside jokes, the kind of chemistry that couldn't be faked despite the lies between them. When James approached, clearly rattled by Ethan's presence, Sophia felt both vindication and emptiness. "You look happy," James said, his eyes darting between them. "I am," Sophia replied, surprising herself with the truth in those words, despite everything. During the cocktail hour, James cornered Sophia near the champagne fountain while Ethan was engaged in conversation with another guest. "Clips Technologies. Really, Sophia?" James hissed, his smile tight for anyone watching. "I always knew you were ambitious, but sleeping with the enemy seems beneath even you." "Enemy?" Sophia kept her voice light, despite the chill running down her spine. "That's an interesting choice of words for someone who claims to run a green company." James's fingers tightened around his champagne flute. "Be careful. Some stories aren't worth pursuing, no matter how good the byline might look." The threat in his voice was unmistakable, confirming suspicions she hadn't fully formed until that moment. Before she could respond, Ethan appeared beside her, sliding an arm around her waist with a possessiveness that seemed more genuine than performed. "Everything all right here?" he asked, his eyes never leaving James's face. "Just catching up," James replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Congratulating Sophia on landing such an influential man. The influence is mutual," Ethan said, pressing a kiss to Sophia's temple that sent an unexpected wave of warmth through her. "She's changed how I see the world." The truth beneath the performance made Sophia's heart stutter, complicating her already tangled emotions. It was during the ceremony that everything shifted again. As the couple exchanged vows about honesty and trust, Ethan's hand found Sophia's, his thumb tracing circles on her palm in a gesture too intimate and unplanned to be part of their act. "I need to tell you something," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. After the reception was a blur of champagne and forced smiles as Sophia waited for whatever revelation Ethan was holding back. When he finally led her to a secluded garden path away from the celebration, his expression was more vulnerable than she'd ever seen. "Eclipse isn't violating environmental regulations," he said without preamble. "We're gathering evidence against Steel Corp Industries, your ex's company. They've been dumping toxic waste and bribing officials to cover it up." "What?" Sophia felt the ground shift beneath her. "That's exactly what I've been investigating Eclipse for." Ethan's laugh held no humor. "I know. When my security team flagged your inquiries, I thought Steel Corp had sent you to discredit us before we could expose them. So the file on me was to determine if you were working for them or genuinely misled." His eyes held hers. "I agreed to this wedding fast to keep you close and figure out your angle. I never expected to actually." The second major cliffhanger exploded with the sound of breaking glass and screams from the reception. A man in a server's uniform was pointing a gun directly at them, no, at Sophia specifically. "Martin won't be publishing any stories about Steel Corp." The man snarled, his finger tightening on the trigger. What happened next would replay in Sophia's mind forever. Ethan lunging forward, the deafening crack of the gunshot, his body jerking as the bullet meant for her tore into his chest. Don't forget to subscribe if you're dying to know what happens next in this life or death situation. And now, as Sophia pressed her hands against Ethan's wound in the garden, where he'd begun to reveal the truth, the full tapestry of deception unraveled. "James is behind this," Ethan gasped, his breathing labored. "The wedding invitation wasn't coincidence. He knew you were investigating, needed to. Control the situation. Save your strength," Sophia begged, the irony crushing her that she'd finally found someone worth trusting only to lose him to the very story that had brought them together. The paramedics arrived in a flurry of activity, lifting Ethan onto a stretcher as Sophia clung to his hand, her gown stained with his blood. "Don't you dare die on me," she commanded. "We have unfinished business." A ghost of his trademark smirk touched his lips. "Is that what we're calling it now?" In the ambulance, Sophia refused to be separated from him, her emerald dress crumpled and blood-stained, as she held his hand through every jolt in the road. "Stay with me," she pleaded when his eyes fluttered closed. "I need to hear the rest of what you were going to say in the garden." His eyes opened briefly, finding hers with startling clarity despite his pain. "I was going to say, I never expected to actually fall for the woman investigating me." Each word seemed to cost him, but he continued, ironic, "that I finally find someone who sees past the money, only when she's looking for evidence." The confession sent Sophia's world tilting on its axis. Every moment they'd shared replayed in her mind with new significance, the lingering touches, the late-night conversations that had strayed far from her investigation, the way his eyes followed her when he thought she wasn't looking. What she had dismissed as charm had been something real growing between them, even amid the deception. "I've been fighting it too," she admitted, tears tracking through her makeup. "Even when I thought you might be behind the environmental disaster, I couldn't stop wondering what it would be like if we'd met under different circumstances." His grip on her hand tightened briefly. "Maybe we can write a new story. If I survive this, when you survive this," she corrected fiercely as the ambulance doors flew open at the hospital. The hospital waiting room became Sophia's prison for the next 6 hours as surgeons worked to remove the bullet that had missed Ethan's heart by centimeters. When the police arrived, she provided everything she knew about Steel Corp's environmental crimes and James's likely involvement in the attempt on her life. Through the endless hours of waiting, Zoe arrived with a change of clothes and stayed by Sophia's side, neither of them mentioning how far beyond a fake date the situation had evolved. "I've never seen you like this about anyone," Zoe finally said, watching Sophia pace the sterile hallway for the 100th time. "Not even James. This is different," Sophia admitted, stopping by the window where dawn was starting to break over the city. "With James, I was in love with the idea of him. Successful journalist meets successful businessman. Picture perfect from the outside. With Ethan, she struggled to articulate the complex emotions. Even when I thought he might be the villain in my story, I couldn't stop myself from seeing the man beneath the CEO. His contradictions, his unexpected kindness, the way he actually listens when I speak." "And now you know he's not the villain," Zoe said softly. "Now I know we're both just people trying to do the right thing in complicated ways." Sophia pressed her forehead against the cool glass. "And I might lose him before I even had him." Dawn was breaking when the surgeon finally appeared with news Ethan would live. The relief that flooded Sophia was more revealing than any confession could have been. When she was finally allowed into his recovery room, Ethan looked smaller somehow against the white hospital sheets, but his eyes still held that intensity when they found hers. "You stayed?" he observed, voice raspy from intubation. "You took a bullet for me," she countered, taking the chair beside his bed. "Seemed like the least I could do. Even though I investigated you. Even though I lied to you." She reached for his hand. "We're both guilty of using each other for our own ends. And now?" he asked, the vulnerability in his question cutting through any remaining pretense between them. Sophia took a deep breath. "Now I think we collaborate. My journalism skills, your resources, we take down Steel Corp together. Partners." He raised an eyebrow. "For starters," she replied, the promise of something more hovering unspoken between them. The weeks of Ethan's recovery transformed their relationship in ways neither could have predicted. Sophia found herself spending nights in the chair beside his hospital bed, her laptop open as they pieced together the evidence against Steel Corp. Each discovery strengthened not only their case, but the bond forming between them, a foundation built on shared purpose and growing trust. The moment Ethan was strong enough to leave the hospital, He insisted on Sophia moving into his penthouse for protection, though they both recognized it as the excuse it was. Working side by side in his home office, the walls between journalist and subject, between deception and truth, crumbled entirely. Their first kiss came unexpectedly, over boxes of evidence and takeout containers at 3 in the morning. Ethan had discovered the connection between Steel Corp and a shell company responsible for bribing EPA officials, and in his excitement, he'd turned to Sophia with such open joy that she'd crossed the space between them without thinking. When their lips met, it felt like the conclusion to a story they'd been writing together all along. "We should probably talk about this," Ethan had murmured against her lips, his hands already tangled in her hair. Later, Sophia had promised, "We have more pressing matters," and she'd pulled him back to her, sealing a different kind of partnership. The story they broke 3 months later shook the corporate world to its foundations. Steel Corp collapsed under the weight of criminal charges, with James facing years in prison for environmental crimes and attempted murder. Eclipse Technologies emerged as a leader in corporate responsibility, with Ethan redirecting the company towards sustainable innovation. If you've made it this far, don't forget to like and share this incredible journey of betrayal and redemption. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life. 1 year after the wedding that had brought them together under false pretenses, Sophia stood in a different garden. This time, she wore white, and the only man with a camera was there to capture memories, not evidence. "Ready for this, Miss Soon?" to be Ethan asked, looking devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo, fully recovered except for the scar she now knew intimately. "Are you ready to marry a woman who once spilled champagne on you as a distraction technique?" She teased, though her eyes held the depth of everything they'd overcome. "I think I've been ready since that moment," he admitted, though I would have preferred skipping the getting shot part of our love story. As they exchanged their own vows, promises of truth, partnership, and protection, Sophia realized that sometimes the most authentic connections begin with deception. Their relationship had been forged in lies, but tempered by bullets and truth, emerging stronger than either could have imagined. "I love you," she whispered as they shared their first kiss as husband and wife. No hidden agenda. "I love you too," he replied against her lips. "And that's the most honest thing I've ever said." The applause of their guests faded into background noise as they held each other. Two people who had found truth in the most unlikely circumstances, proving that sometimes the right person stays not just for the vows, but for the ever after that follows. As they moved to their reception, Ethan pulled Sophia into a private moment behind a fragrant wall of jasmine. "You know what today is?" he asked, his forehead resting against hers. "Besides our wedding day," she smiled, already knowing the answer. "1 year since I took a bullet for you," he said, his fingers tracing the curve of her cheek. "Best decision I ever made. I think we can find less dramatic ways to show our love going forward." Sophia laughed softly, though I admit it was quite the grand gesture. "I'd do it again in a heartbeat." His expression turned serious. "You gave me something I didn't even know I was missing, Sophia, a purpose beyond profit, a partner who challenges me, a love that's stronger than any corporate merger." Sophia's award-winning exposé had eventually led to sweeping environmental reforms in the industry, while Ethan's company pioneered new technologies for ecological restoration. Together, they'd established a foundation supporting investigative journalism, focused on corporate accountability, turning their individual missions into a shared legacy. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't spilled that champagne?" Sophia asked as they swayed together for their first dance, the fairy lights above them mirroring the stars. "Fate would have found another way," Ethan answered with certainty. "Some connections are inevitable, even when they begin with lies and nearly end with bullets." As he dipped her dramatically, causing their guests to cheer, Sophia knew he was right. Their love story might have started as fiction, but it had become the most authentic truth of her life. Proof that sometimes the most unexpected plus one at a wedding might just be the person you were meant to spend forever with. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances and unexpected love. Sometimes life's most beautiful chapters begin with the words, "I think I'm in love with you," even when they come in the most unexpected moments.